On a foggy night in June 1962, three shadows slipped into the icy waters of San Francisco Bay, defying the fortress that had caged them. A prison carved from rock, surrounded by a merciless sea, known as Alcatraz. The island loomed like a sentinel, its light slicing through the mist, a beacon of despair for the men who dared to dream beyond its walls. They weren't the first to try escaping the rock, but they aimed to be the last anyone would talk about, because they'd make it or they'd vanish trying. It was the early 1960s, a time when America hummed with the crackle of transistor radios and the distant rumble of Cold War threats. Cars grew fins, kids traded baseball cards, and the nation prided itself on locking its worst criminals where no key could free them. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, perched 1.25 miles off San Francisco's shore, was the crown jewel of that pride. A maximum security hellhole, its concrete cells and steel bars held bank robbers, murderers, and men too clever for lesser jails. The bay's currents, cold enough to numb a man's bones, and tales of sharks circling the island made it a tomb for hope. Escape? A fool's fantasy, until three fools turned it real. Frank Morris was the spark. Lean and sharp-eyed, he carried a mind that cut through problems like a blade through rope. Born in 1926, orphaned young, he bounced through foster homes before landing in trouble at 13. By 1960, when he stepped onto Alcatraz's dock in handcuffs, he'd already slipped out of enough prisons to earn a reputation. Bank robbery put him behind bars, but escaping kept him moving, until they sent him here, figuring the rock would hold him. It didn't take long for Frank to scan the cell block with those restless eyes, spotting cracks in the unbreakable. John Anglin was the steady hand. Older by a year than his brother, born in 1930 to a sprawling Georgia farm family scraping by on dirt and sweat, he'd turned to crime with a cool head. Bank jobs were his trade, pulling them off with Clarence like they were born for it. John's broad shoulders and quiet grit landed him in Alcatraz after too many breakout attempts elsewhere, Atlanta, Leavenworth, places that couldn't chain him long. He met Frank in the yard one gray morning, their talk short but heavy, the kind that plants seeds in desperate soil. Clarence Anglin was the fire. Younger, born in 1931, he stuck to John like a shadow, impulsive where his brother calculated. Same farm, same hard life, same path to robbery. Though their stick-ups leaned on toy guns more than bullets, a quirk that didn't soften their sentences. Clarence's quick hands and quicker temper got him caged beside John, and when Frank whispered about freedom, those hands itched to tear the walls down. Together, they were a trio forged by chance, bound by a hunger no prison could starve out. It started in whispers, late 1961, over tin trays of cold oatmeal in the mess hall. Frank leaned in, voice low, sketching a mad idea. Widen the cell vents, climb to the roof, cross the bay on something they'd build themselves. John nodded, seeing the angles. Clarence smirked, already tasting the salt air. They'd need tools, time, and a miracle, but Frank had a way of making miracles sound like plans. The guards patrolled, batons tapping bars, oblivious to the storm brewing in cell block B. A vent here, a blind spot there. Frank saw it all, and the brothers believed him. 3 men, 1 shot, against a fortress built to bury dreams. The rock had never lost a soul to freedom. Not yet. In the dim glow of Alcatraz's mess hall, late 1961, Frank Morris hunched over a tray of congealed oatmeal, his spoon tracing invisible lines in the air. The clatter of tin and the murmur of guarded voices faded as he spoke, low and urgent, to John and Clarence Anglin. "We go through the vents," he said, eyes glinting like steel. "Widen them, hit the roof, build something to float us across the bay." John's steady gaze met his, a slow nod sealing the pact. Clarence leaned in, restless, a grin tugging at his lips. "How long?" he asked. Frank's answer was a number: 6 months. 6 months of sweat, secrecy, and steel against stone. That night, the plan took root, a fragile thing in a place built to crush it. They weren't alone at first. Alan West, a lanky car thief with a nervous laugh, caught wind of it in the yard, his own escape dreams aligning with theirs. For cells in a row, B 138 to B 141, each a cog in Frank's machine. The vents were the key, those narrow slits above their sinks, 6 inches by 9, leading to a utility corridor behind the cell block. Unguarded, unpatrolled, a whisper of freedom if they could reach it. But concrete framed those vents, thick and unyielding, and the guards watched like hawks. Frank had an answer for that too. Tools, scavenged from the prison's own belly. Spoons vanished from the mess hall, slipped into sleeves or socks, their metal edges dulled but stubborn. John found a vacuum cleaner motor in the workshop, its hum a memory of repair jobs he'd done before crime took him. With a length of stolen wire, Frank turned it into a drill, crude and rattling, but enough to bite into concrete. Clarence spotted saw blades in a trash heap near the maintenance shed, rusted but sharp, and palmed them during a work shift. These were their weapons, laughable against Alcatraz's might, yet in Frank's hands, they promised a way out. "We work at night," he told them, after count before dawn. Slow and steady. The noise was the first enemy. Metal scraping stone echoed like a gunshot in the cell block's silence. Frank had a fix, his accordion, a battered thing he'd bartered for with cigarettes. During the prison's music hour, 5:30 to 9 o'clock, he played, reedy, off-key notes spilling from B. 138, a cover for the grind of their labor. John took first watch, perched on his bunk, ears tuned to the boots of patrolling guards. Clarence worked beside Frank, spoon scraping, dust falling like snow into their palms. They stuffed the debris into pillowcases, then mattresses, a secret growing heavier each night. West lagged, his hands slower, but the vent holes stretched, inch by inch, a tunnel to hope. The guards were the second enemy, their rounds unpredictable, their flashlights probing shadows. One night, a week in, a lanky officer lingered outside Clarence's cell, beam dancing across the bars. The spoon froze in Clarence's hand, dust clinging to his sweaty fingers, the vent half exposed behind a towel slung over the sink. Frank's accordion faltered, then surged louder, a frantic jig. John coughed, loud and ragged, drawing the guard's eye. "You sick, Anglin?" the man growled, peering in. "Just the damp," John rasped, throat tight. The beam swung away, boots retreating, and Clarence exhaled, heart hammering. They'd dodged ruin, but the clock ticked louder now. Every scrape a gamble, every night a step closer to discovery. By December, the vents showed progress, edges crumbling, the corridor beyond a dark promise. Frank mapped it in his head. 30 feet of pipes and wires, then a roof hatch, then the bay. John and Clarence trusted his vision, their faith forged in shared desperation. "We'll need more than holes," John said one morning, voice a murmur over cold coffee. "Something to float on. Something to fool em when we're gone." Frank nodded, already scheming, rafts, decoys, a masquerade to outwit the rock. 6 months stretched ahead, a tightrope over an abyss, and they balanced on it, tools in hand, eyes on the horizon. The plan wasn't just escape. It was defiance, a fist raised against a prison that had never bent. And it was working. By early 1962, the vent holes in cells B. 138, B. 139, and B. 140 gaped wide enough to swallow a man's shoulders, their edges rough and secret behind draped towels. Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin had clawed their way to the edge of possibility, but freedom demanded more than a tunnel. It needed a lie. "We can't just vanish," Frank said one frigid January night, his breath fogging in the cell block's damp air. "They'll know the second we're gone unless we leave something behind." John's eyes narrowed, catching the drift. "Us," Clarence muttered, tapping his bunk. "In bed, asleep." Frank's nod was sharp. "Exactly. Dummies." And away across the water. The plan thickened, a web of deception spinning tighter. The dummies came first. Frank sketched the idea. Heads to fool the night guards, lifelike enough to buy them hours. They scavenged what Alcatraz offered, soap shavings from the showers, toilet paper hoarded strip by strip, cement dust from their vent work. Mixed with water, it formed a gritty paste, molded into ovals on their bunks. John took charge of the faces, his steady hands shaping noses and brows, while Clarence slipped into the barbershop during a shift, palming clumps of hair swept from inmates' necks. "Brown, black, close enough," he whispered, tucking the strands into his sleeve. Back in their cells, they painted the heads with flesh-toned hues from stolen art kits, brushes trembling under flickering lights. Placed on pillows, hair pressed into the drying paste, the decoys stared back, eerie twins, silent conspirators. Next came the raft, Clarence's obsession. "We'll sink without it," he said, pacing his cell, fingers twitching for action. Raincoats were the answer. Dozens of them, some donated by inmates who sensed a scheme but asked no questions, others lifted from the laundry. Clarence stitched them with needles bartered from the tailor shop, thread pulled from old shirts. He worked by touch after lights out, seams sealed with heat from steam pipes snaking through the cell block. The rubber smell stung his nose, a sharp promise of the bay. John shaped life vests from more raincoats, stuffing them with scraps until they bulged, buoyant enough to keep a man afloat. 50 coats, Frank calculated, and we're across. The pieces piled up, hidden under blankets, in hollowed-out books, behind cardboard painted to match the walls. A fragile arsenal growing nightly. Every move risked exposure. Guards roamed, their shadows stretching long across the concrete, and the four, Frank, John, Clarence, and Alan West, knew one slip could bury them. West lagged, his vent still too narrow, his dummy half-formed. "I'll catch up," he grumbled, but doubt crept into his voice, a crack in their unity. Frank pushed harder, his mind a vice on details. John steadied them, a rock against Clarence's impatience. "Slow down." John hissed one night as Clarence stitched too fast, needle snapping. "We're no good caught." Clarence glared but obeyed, the raft's shape emerging under his hands, a lumpy, defiant thing, their lifeline. The stakes spiked in March. A guard captain, broad and suspicious, called a shakedown, his boots thumping closer as the tier woke to barked orders. "Cells open. Hands out." Frank's dummy lay under his blanket, unpainted, hairless. John's raft section peeked from a slit mattress. Clarence shoved his vest behind a stack of magazines, heart slamming against his ribs. The captain stopped at B. 139, John's cell, peering in. "What's that smell?" he growled, sniffing the rubber tang. John leaned against the bars, casual as stone. "New shoes, sir." Pinching my feet. The man's flashlight swept the bunk, inches from the mattress's secret, then flicked away. "Keep it clean," he muttered, moving on. The tier exhaled as one, but Frank's eyes burned into the dark. "Too close," he said later. "We're running out of nights." The masquerade hardened, dummies with staring eyes, a raft folded tight, vests ready to strap on. The vent holes stretched to their limit, the corridor beyond a black invitation. 6 months had shrunk to weeks, then days, each step a dance with ruin. Frank's plan wasn't just escape now. It was a taunt, a shadow play to outfox the rock's unblinking watch. The bay waited, cold and vast, and the trio shaped their tools to meet it, hands steady, minds racing. The guards saw nothing but bunks and bars. Soon they'd see even less. June 11th, 1962, draped Alcatraz in a shroud of fog, the bay's chill seeping through the cell block's concrete veins. At 9:30 p.m., the lights-out bell clanged, and Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin moved like shadows honed by months of rehearsal. The dummies lay in their bunks, painted faces staring blankly, hair matted to soap and cement skulls, blankets tucked to mimic sleep. Frank gave the signal, a sharp tap on his bars, and the trio slid towels aside, revealing vent holes stretched wide by spoon and blade. Muscles tensed, they squeezed through, shoulders scraping rough edges, into the utility corridor's dank embrace. Alan West's curses echoed faintly, his vent stuck tight, a grate he couldn't budge, but there was no time to wait. 3 would run, 1 would stay. The corridor stretched 30 feet, a maze of pipes and wires, its air thick with rust and mold. Frank led, his lean frame ducking beams, John hauling the folded raft, Clarence clutching the vests. Their socks muffled steps on the concrete, hearts pounding louder than the distant crash of waves. A ladder loomed ahead, bolted to the wall, leading to a roof hatch. Frank climbed first, fingers burning on cold steel, and shoved the hatch open with a grunt. Fog rolled in, a gray veil against the cellhouse roof, and they spilled out, crouching low as a spotlight's beam swept the yard below, missing them by a breath. The prison hummed, alive but blind. Downward now, 50 feet along a drain pipe, its rusted bolts biting into palms. Frank slid first, boots braced, then John, then Clarence, the pipe groaning under their weight. They hit the ground in the shadow of the cell block, a yard crisscrossed by fences and guards' eyes. 2 barriers stood between them and the shore. 12-foot walls topped with barbed coils, glinting in the mist. Frank scaled the first, hands finding gaps, ignoring the sting of torn cloth. John followed, steady as ever, boosting Clarence over. The second fence loomed. They climbed again, faster, desperation fueling aching limbs. A barb snagged Clarence's sleeve, ripping free with a hiss, but not his skin. They dropped to the far side, the northeastern shore opening before them. Rocky, windswept theirs. At the water's edge, they unfolded the raft. Its raincoat seemed straining as Clarence pumped air with a bellows rigged from crate boards and rubber scraps. The craft inflated, lumpy but defiant, bobbing on the black waves. John strapped on a vest, tossing another to Frank, while Clarence tied the third tight, his grin wild in the dark. "Now or never," Frank said, voice cutting the wind, and they shoved off, paddling with boards torn from a supply shed. The bay clawed at them, currents tugging like hands, cold soaking through stolen shoes. Alcatraz shrank behind, its siren silent for now. They aimed north, toward Angel Island's faint silhouette, a stepping stone to the mainland. Halfway out, a rumble broke the night. A patrol boat's engine, its searchlight slicing fog. "Down!" Frank hissed, and they flattened against the raft, faces pressed to rubber, breath held in burning lungs. The beam danced close, skimming the waves, then veered west, swallowed by mist. Clarence let out a shaky laugh, paddles dipping again, the shore a distant promise. The raft rocked, seams leaking, but held just. Minutes stretched into forever, the cold, numbing fingers, the current a relentless foe. Yet they rode, three against the bay, the rock's grip loosening with every stroke. They hit land near Marin County, not Angel Island. Waves had dragged them off course, but alive. The raft deflated with a sigh as they stumbled onto shore, soaked and trembling, shoes squelching on gravel. Alcatraz's lights flickered far off, a beast unaware it had been robbed. No time to savor it, dawn loomed, and with it pursuit. Frank scanned the dark, John steady at his side, Clarence kicking the raft's remains into the surf. They'd crossed the uncrossable, outwitted the unbreakable. Now the mainland beckoned, and freedom demanded one last move. The shore near Marin County welcomed Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin with a slap of cold gravel under their sodden shoes. The raft, a limp heap of raincoats, sank into the surf as they staggered inland, fog cloaking their trembling frames. June 12, 1962, teetered on the edge of dawn, the bay behind them a conquered beast, Alcatraz a distant glow still ignorant of their flight. They'd cheated the rock, but freedom wasn't theirs until they vanished, wet, hunted, and alive. A quiet road curved through the dark, and there it sat, a sedan parked haphazardly, its chrome glinting under a moonless sky. Frank nodded, sharp and silent. John checked the shadows for eyes. Clarence knelt by the driver's door, fingers quick with a strip of metal pried from the raft's frame. The lock clicked, a soft victory, and he slid inside, tearing at wires beneath the dash. Sparks flared, the engine coughed, then roared, a beast woken from sleep. Frank took the wheel, hands steady on the unfamiliar grip, while John climbed in beside him, mapping their fade into nowhere. Clarence slammed the back door, breathless, grinning like a man reborn. Tires crunched gravel as they peeled away, the sedan's growl swallowing the night. Headlights off, they carved through Marin's backroads, fogged their shield, the bay's edge blurring behind. Alcatraz's siren wailed at last, faint and late, a cry for ghosts already gone. Frank's eyes flicked to the rear view, John's locked on the dark ahead, Clarence's on the freedom rushing past. 3 men, 1 car, a legend stealing into dawn, defiant, unbound, shadows the rock would never reclaim. June 12, 1962, broke over Alcatraz with a gray dawn, the fog thinning to reveal a prison still wrapped in routine's iron grip. At 7 a.m., the wake-up bell clanged, a harsh echo through cell block B, rousing inmates to another day of steel and silence. Guard Thomas Riley, a barrel-chested man with 10 years on the rock, trudged down the tier, his boots slapping concrete, his baton tapping bars in rhythm. "Up, you lot," he barked, eyes skimming bunks for movement. B-138B, 139B, 140, Morris, Anglin, 3 troublemakers, quiet for once. Too quiet. Riley paused, squinting through the bars. Blankets lay smooth, heads on pillows, not a twitch. "Sleepin' like kings," he muttered, but a prickle climbed his spine. He banged his baton harder. "Morris. Anglin. Move it." Silence answered, thick and wrong. Riley keyed open B, 138, stepping inside, the cell's damp chill settling on him. Frank Morris's bunk looked perfect, too perfect. He yanked the blanket back, and the head rolled free, tumbling to the floor with a dull thud. Soap and cement, painted eyes staring up, hair stuck in clumps. A dummy. Riley's breath caught, his shout ripping through the block. "They're gone. Sound it." The siren screamed to life, a wail that shook the island, guards spilling from posts like ants from a kicked hill. Cells B, 139 and B, 140 told the same tale. John and Clarence Anglin's bunks held hollow twins, their faces mocking in the dim light. Warden Olin Blackwell stormed in, face red as the foghorn's blast, barking orders. "Check the vents. The yard. The shore." Riley's flashlight found the holes above the sinks, widened, jagged, and empty, towels shoved aside. The utility corridor gaped beyond, a dark vein they'd bled into the night. 6 months, Blackwell growled, kicking a mattress. 6 damn months under our noses. Dust spilled out, crumbs of their secret labor, and Riley's stomach sank. Spoons, a drill, they'd missed it all. The yard search turned frantic. Guards scoured fences, finding scuffs on barbed wire, footprints fading into fog-damp earth. At the northeastern shore, a scrap of rubber snagged on rocks, raincoat stitches torn open. They took the bay, a young guard stammered, staring at the waves. Blackwell's jaw tightened. No one swims that. No one. But the raft shred said otherwise, and the prison's myth cracked wide. Boats launched, engines roaring toward Angel Island, while sirens called the FBI, the marshals, the world beyond the rock. Inside, Alan West slumped in B, 141 vent half open, spilling the plan to save his skin, dummies, raft, a mad dash he'd missed. By noon, Alcatraz buzzed with rage and disbelief. Guards retraced steps, inmates smirked behind bars, and Blackwell faced a truth colder than the bay. 3 men had turned his fortress into a fool's stage. The dummies sat in the warden's office, grim trophies of a night that broke the unbreakable. Out there, somewhere, Morris and the Anglins had slipped the net, or drowned trying. Either way, the rock's roar was a hollow echo now, chasing shadows it couldn't catch.